Hello and welcome to Chess Please. Here are 5 phrases that just by knowing them will help you get better at chess. Let's jump in. So our first term is PP on the PP, otherwise known as put pressure on the pinned piece. That's naturally what comes to mind when you say PP on the PP. This is a Levy Rosman special and just a wonderful way of converting your pins into actual gained material. So as we see, a pretty simple example here, we have a knight that is pinned by the rook to the king. So rather than just leave that pin be, you want to start to build pressure on that pin piece. You want to start to add in as many attackers as you can as possible. So in this case, solution is pretty simple. We put pressure on with the pawn, the knight can't move, so even if the king moves next turn, we just gobble that up. Basically, when your opponent has a pinned piece, you want to pile on as much pressure as you can on that pinned piece before the pin is broken and it moves away to win that piece, and maybe something a little extra as well. And it doesn't just have to be the king that it's pinned to. This also applies for relative pins where a piece is pinned to a piece of greater value behind it. So again, we see that that pin has happened here with the bishop being pinned to the rook here. So this is the pinned piece. So PP on the PP, putting pressure on this piece. We stack on a little bit more. If they take, we just take their rook. Happy days, we win the exchange. They won't do that because that's folly. And we just take here and we're up a piece. And we can, maybe move our rook out like this to give us some time to get our bishop out of there. But that is all the fruits of putting pressure on a pinned piece. PP on the PP. Next one. So the next one is one of my favorite principles early on in the game, and it is to take is a mistake. To take is a mistake. Popularized by Grandmaster Igor Smirnov, and this concept seems a little counterintuitive initially when you're saying to take is a mistake. To take a piece is a mistake. That seems absurd. How are you going to win if you don't take pieces? But I would like to distinguish between taking a piece and winning a piece. So winning a piece, winning free material that your opponent isn't going to recapture, I condone that in the strongest terms. You should win free stuff. But taking is not the same as winning. Trading is not the same as winning a piece. And so often you will see beginner and intermediate players trading, initiating trades to resolve the tension on the board and benefiting literally nothing from those trades. And here's a very kind of common example in a kind of a Queen's Gambit setup here. So you see this tension here, and the inclination is just to resolve that tension. It's more comfortable to resolve that tension and say, well, look, they're going to be less dangerous with fewer pieces on the board. So you take here. But if you look at what's happened here, you take that piece and you say, okay, I'm going to take one of your pawns. And you kind of know they're going to take this back. And that's the problem. They take this back with the bishop. So the trade that's happened here is I've taken one of your pawns, but now you get to take one of my pawns and you get to develop your piece. So it's just not an equal trade at all. So taking in that case is a mistake. And in many cases, trades that you initiate, you really should be able to articulate in words what you're gaining from that trade, because otherwise so often your opponent will recapture by developing a piece, or recapture with tempo, or recapture by improving the position of one of their pieces. So look at what happens when that trade, when the dust settles on that trade. To take is a mistake. Next one. Now the next one is a Daniel Naroditsky favourite of mine, and that is Frankfurt Airport. Now Frankfurt Airport relates to rerouting a piece through a square that it's not going to live on. It's not going to stay there forever, but it needs to go to that square to get where you really want it to go. The analogy being Frankfurt Airport, often used for connecting flights. It's not necessarily your final destination, but it's a bit of a hub. It's kind of where you'll go to go on to a further flight. A very common example of this is in the Ruy Lopez, where you do this strange knight maneuver with your knight on b1 in order to get it onto the king side. You develop it onto d2, but then you move it back to f1, and that looks like a little strange place for it, although it's not particularly bad. Very good defensive piece. But in terms of attacking, it seems a little out of the way, but obviously the real goal is to develop the knight out here, get it active on the king side, and now you have a ton of great options for this knight, like here. You can bring this knight in here to start piling pressure on this square. But just in general, this knight is much better placed on this side of the board where the action is going to go down. And you had to go through this connecting flight, this Frankfurt Airport section to get there. Just a good way of thinking that. Try to visualize where your pieces are going to be best placed and then draw out the route there. And you're probably going to have some squares that you're like, I don't want it to end up there, but it should go there in order to get where I want it to go. Frankfurt Airport. Next one. So our next one is the elastic band trap, and the elastic band trap is one of my favorites because it has won me so many free pawns over the years, and it comes about very, very regularly. So what we have here is a very typical construction where we've got a bishop attacking a knight and a bishop in behind it. So the knight is like theoretically pinned to that bishop, though the material is all equivalent, so it's not like a heavy pin or anything like that. But it's good to know, because while this bishop is attacking this knight, pins work both ways. So if this knight gets out of the way, then depending on who gets to go first, that both bishops are under attack. And what I mean and how you can use that to your advantage is, see if this knight can get out of the way such that it wins material. So I'm looking at this pawn here, and it comes back and defends this bishop here, so that you're gaining material and defending the piece that's being attacked at the same time. So what happens here is knight takes here, and no matter what white does here, it's a trade of one piece and you've won that pawn that the knight just took. So if the knight takes here, happy days, you take with the bishop, and then it's all fine. You've got the pawn and the bishop for the knight. And then if instead the bishop takes here, the whole thing of the elastic band is bishop taking here with check. You're thinking, oh, that's trouble. But the knight is in position to snap back to reality and take that bishop with the elastic band maneuver. So that's the elastic band. The knight getting out of the way, grabbing a little something, coming back to defend the bishop. Lovely stuff. So our next one is the umbrella pawn. An umbrella pawn is an opponent's pawn that has reached a fairly advanced stage, normally the 2nd or the 7th rank, that your king is able to actually just tuck in behind. So rather than the pawn promoting and you losing the game immediately, this pawn is actually providing some really, really necessary cover from this rook that's threatening to infiltrate. And because you can't take your own pawns, this pawn is actually going to be an enduring defensive resource for us. So it does keep our king locked in place, but it also keeps this rook from infiltrating ourselves. And even though we have equal material here, and black has a very advanced pawn, white is actually slightly winning here because their rook is more active, doesn't have to stay in defense of this umbrella pawn, and can kind of go and hoover up all these pawns, and the computer sees it as white is going to get promoted first here. So that is an umbrella pawn. That is one that shields your king from onslaught, and it kind of acts like an umbrella. So while it, as many umbrellas do, seem really threatening, this one actually just sits in front of your king, shielding it from attacks from further back. And that's an umbrella pawn. So that is going to be our 5 phrases that will help you get better at chess. PP on the PP, put pressure on the pinned piece. To take is a mistake. Don't initiate a trade if your opponent is going to be the one that benefits from that trade, even if that's just them developing a piece and an equal trade. Third one, Frankfurt Airport. Find your ideal end state locations for your pieces and find what squares they'll need to go through for their connecting flights to get there via Frankfurt Airport, as it were. An elastic band, if you've got that kind of bishop, knight, bishop configuration, see if you can get your knight out of there in a way that it claims a pawn or a piece and defends the bishop that gets uncovered in the attack. And you'll win a lot of free pawns. And then an umbrella pawn, when times get tough, see if you can't hide yourself behind one of your enemy pawns. Generally you want it to be an isolated pawn because you don't want additional hassle in here. But oftentimes you'll find that umbrella pawn can be a blessing rather than a curse. So those are 5 idioms that I think if you incorporate those into your understanding of chess, you'll have a better time and you'll win a lot more games. Thanks very much. Feel free to subscribe and stick around if you're interested in content like this, and like and comment on the video as well. Thank you very much. Have a great day.